So this is going to change, right? As soon as I finish recording it, I'm going to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot that match, because I am an idiot. But at the same time, I was like, these are the 10 matches that popped right into my brain as soon as I decided to do this list. And we're going to be doing more of these because people keep asking for them. And of course, please do make sure you subscribe and leave your favorite 10 WWE matches below. And we're going to do other companies soon too as well. So yes, strap yourself in and get ready for the ride. And we start 10 and we go to WrestleMania 18, which is Hulk Hogan versus The Rock. It's the classic old tale, right? If you turn the sound off, it's an okay match. It's very passable. But you put the sound on and it could be the greatest wrestling in-ring reaction to anything that you've seen in your life. Now, if you watched it live, it was a right trip, because I don't think anybody expected Hulk Hogan to get that kind of reaction, or the fact that Rock was going to get booed. But even if you watch it now, it still does something visceral to you, because it gets inside your tum-tum, it gets inside your body, and it kind of makes it feel like you're there, because you get an adrenaline boost, because that's how loud it is, and that is how invested these fans are. I can't imagine if you were there. I think Chris Van Vliet said he was live at that show. I'm pretty sure that's accurate, and it must have been amazing. And the fact it wasn't the main event is utterly stupid. Now, I know that Hulk Hogan is a controversial figure these days. I can't get that out of my head either. But when you just watch it in terms of a sports entertainment spectacle, I think it kind of sums up exactly what WWE should be. You have the past versus the present, or icon versus icon, as it was pitched, and you also kind of get a circumvented response that, again, wasn't on anybody's bingo cards, and that just makes it all the more fun. You know, it's in Canada, so of course WWE go, it's Bizarro World, but it wasn't Bizarro World. It was people tying into their love of the past and their love of the present, where, oh my gosh, Hulk Hogan has come back to the WWE after 7 years in WCW. That was overwhelming as well, and given that in that period, The Rock had become one of the biggest, if not the biggest stars of all time, it was magic, man, and it's still magic today, because, again, wrestling is all about what is the crowd doing while you're doing all of your moves. Anyone that has made it anywhere will say, of course, the moves are important, but it's the storytelling and it's the reaction of the fans, and this could be the best reaction of all time. You could argue that, and I would totally understand it, and it's why some people go, oh, it's a 3 out of 5 wrestling match. Okay, sure, in terms of maybe what they're doing in the actual ring, but I think you have to tie in story, you have to tie in response, atmosphere, surprise, how it made you feel, and when you put all that in the pot, yeah, I do think it's absolutely brilliant and absolutely great, and everyone is going to have a different opinion on that, but I must have watched this match over a dozen times, and it never actually gets old. Number 9 is one that I put in there as a personal nod to my childhood self, because I do think that's important. Too many times people go, well, you can't put that in there. It wasn't a very good match. Okay, but when I was like 3 years old, I didn't really know what a good match was. And what I did know is who I liked and who I didn't like. And I knew what Jeopardy was, and I knew what being scared was, which is why we go to SummerSlam 1998, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Undertaker. Now, the most magical thing about this is Stone Cold Steve Austin sort of headbutts The Undertaker's jaw halfway through the match, or maybe even earlier on, and he knocks himself out, right? Pretty sure he got a concussion after the fact. He's talked about this over and over again. I never saw that as a kid, and actually when you watch the match now, it's very average if you want to talk about work rate or anything like that, but one of the men in it can't remember anything, so you have to give it a bypass, whatever the right word would be, an asterisk. But once again, when I'm a child, I didn't know that, and I was such a Stone Cold Steve Austin fan. I went into this nervous that Steve Austin was going to lose his newly won WWF title that, of course, he just won at WrestleMania 14. To the point, I pulled a sickie that day from school, and I stayed at home, and when Austin finally hit the stunner and got the 1, 2, 3, I accidentally got carried away because I was totally bought in. I was just in the moment, and I jumped around and celebrating, and my mum popped her head around the corner and went, oh, you feeling better, are you? And I probably went, and tried to act like I was still sick. But it's always a match that comes into my brain, especially when I hear the people involved in it saying, yeah, it wasn't that good, because it meant something to me, man. And that's why it's the special sauce once more when it comes to professional wrestling. I allowed myself to be totally invested to the point I was worried. Talk about suspending your disbelief. I don't know what my opinions of professional wrestling then were in terms of, do I know it's real or predetermined or whatever words we want to use, because on that night in August, whatever the hell it was, the highway to hell, it was real to me, damn it, to use that old catchphrase. So I wasn't going to put it in eventually. I thought, no, man, screw it. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about my favorite matches, and it's a memory I've had now for 25 years. You got to give it a nod. And now we turn the ante up as well, and we jump forward 2 years to the Royal Rumble 2000. You already know what it is. It's Cactus Jack versus Triple H in the maddest street fight I'd ever seen in my life at the time. And I still can't believe the WWF, as it was then, did this in 2000, because it was like something you'd seen from ECW, which of course they were hugely inspired by, even more so during the Attitude Era when they were trying to appeal to a certain demographic. And I guess you expected it from Mick Foley, or Cactus Jack as he was now, because by that point the legend and the lore of Cactus Jack from WCW and ECW had been put out out there. And Triple H obviously was a badass. He looked like a badass, and perception is reality, not only in life, but in professional wrestling. But I don't think anyone thought we were going to go this nuts. And there are stories to this. I mean, it's all allegedly, who knows? But I think Mick Foley has talked about it. The barbed wire bat we used on him was real, but the barbed wire bat we used on Triple H was not, which I totally understand. I would use the fake one if we want to call it that. I bet it still hurt. But it's the pedigree into the thumbtacks. It's that awful gash that Triple H has in his calf. Nobody talks about that. You get some idiots go, oh yeah, he used a fake bat. He has a gash in his calf where you can see cartilage, man, and he still carries on the match. So once again, don't tell me he's not a tough guy. And again, there's pins near flipping Mick Foley's eyes. It is so brutal. And I watched it again, I mean, not for this video, but recently enough where I didn't feel like I had to watch it again. And man, it still gets you, even though it is like 24 years old, almost 25 years old, as I sit here and record this. But it was so important, I think, for WWE at the time to let you know, man, we are just doing a variety show these days. You don't know what you're going to get. And because we were building Triple H to the top heel at the time, surprise, surprise, Mick Foley took another person and said, I'm going to make you a star, dude. He did it with Randy Orton and a whole host of other people, probably Edge as well. I'm going to forget somebody, so I'll stop listing them. But is it the best street fight that WWE has ever done? I think it's up there, and it's certainly my favorite because, once again, I was so young, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like Santa Claus coming into my house and taking a mask off and going, I'm Tom Cruise. It's like, hang on, wait, I can't put those two things together, although I got more enjoyment out of the match. If that happened, I wouldn't know what was going on, and I probably would have ran away, and you would have never seen me again. But it absolutely had to get in there because it made an impression on me. At number 7, we jump to WrestleMania 17. Of course, it's The Rock versus Steve Austin. I would take all 3 of their WrestleMania matches and say they all stack up and you get something unique and different from every one of them. But you have the majestic nature of WrestleMania 17, which is still one of the best WrestleManias ever. You have the amazing crowd at the Silverdome, Superdome. It's not either of those, whichever one it is. And you have the fans going absolutely crazy. I mean, it's totally dumb in the sense that we try and turn Steve Austin heel in Texas. And I was like, I don't care that you teamed up with McMahon. We love you. And of course, it wasn't a good idea for business, but you don't have to worry about what happened to analytics afterwards. It just feels like the 2 biggest stars in wrestling coming together again at the end of what is a superb show. And maybe you could even argue this is the end of the Attitude Era. I mean, that's up for you to debate until the cows come home. But it is just awesome. And once more, we've already talked about it. It's about atmosphere and build and promos. And when you watch the build to this with the Limp Bizkit theme that people still talk about, and the Jim Ross sit-down interview where Steve Austin feels like he legitimately has to win the world title, and The Rock kind of has this air about him, like, well, I have to beat you in order to take your spot at the top of the company. It's just great, man. And if you're not into goofy wrestling, I mean, you're nuts, because goofy wrestling is the best, but you like your main event wrestling to be serious, this is it, man. It feels like every single thing is so important to both guys, to the company, which I guess is why they tried to pull off the thing they did with Vince McMahon, and it didn't work according to plan. But it genuinely is one of the best main events ever. I don't really know. I like WrestleMania 19, Austin and The Rock, but again, that's because it comes with certain emotions too. But I would probably say this one is the best, or at least the peak of their entire feud. And if you've never seen it, I strongly suggest you change that today. At number 6, we go right back in time to SummerSlam 91. And this is probably one of the first matches where I was like, man, this wrestling's pretty good. It's Mr. Perfect versus Bret the Hitman Hart. I mean, it's just awesome, and it holds up so well. This is a match that I went to watch because I was like, well, how does this compare to 2024 wrestling? And it's just the way they work it. Now, of course, they're doing moves you wouldn't be able to do in real life, but it's the way they sell it. It's the way they kind of go from one move to the next. It's the transitions. It's the reversals. It's the speed. It's the way flipping Bret Hart takes front turnbuckles and flies back like he's been shot. And man, is Mr. Perfect the best seller ever? I think it's a debate to be had. He's probably at least top 5. And this is when he was working with a back that didn't work. He had a broken back, essentially, and he was going to be gone for ages after this. It's just the chemistry the two have. And I suppose this is a match you show to someone that goes, oh man, wrestling just a bunch of fake garbage. Like, is it? Is it? You watch this, and again, try and watch it with your drama brain engaged, and you can totally believe that it's 2 people competing over the Intercontinental title. You also get Roddy Piper on commentary, and the fact that Bret wins that championship, which does add the needed emotion. It's just brilliant. And sometimes I think to myself, no, that's not true, maybe the second best ever. But sometimes I do think, is Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig the best opponent Bret Hart ever had? And he's in a close number 2, just based on how this list is going to play out. But maybe, you're a brand new wrestling fan. I cannot suggest enough or advise you enough to go back to SummerSlam 91 and watch this. It will tell you why people still look to Bret Hart now as one of the best to ever do it. And in terms of Kurt Hennig, still doesn't get enough love. Does not get enough love. In terms of putting a wrestling match together and then executing it, the man is second to none. And I got another boring one for you at number 5, but again, it totally changed how I saw wrestling, and it's WrestleMania 3, Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat. Because this is one of another templates that people use today. Not only because, you know, the Macho Man was one of the earliest converts, is that the right word, of having it all written down on paper. I mean, these days, people just talk about it in the back, but in the 80s, when was this, 1986 or 7, whatever it was, you didn't sort of plan things out in the back, you called it in the ring, brother. But Randy Savage was like, no, this is what we're going to do. And not only did they go out there and pull it off brilliantly, but this was way more high-flying and technical than what the WWF was doing. I mean, the main event was Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, and both styles are good. You need a variety show. But what these two did here is basically open the door for what wrestling was going to evolve into in 2024 and ever since the last decade or whatever it was. I'm sure there were other people doing it, probably in Japan too. A lot comes over from the East, but it's just so well done. And Ricky Steamboat is arguably the greatest babyface ever. Randy Savage, I think, is underrated as a wrestler because, again, he understood the sports entertainment bit so much. He had the costumes, he had the promo voice, he had the sparkly hats. But that's why, to me, he's one of the best wrestlers ever and somebody I gravitated towards because when I was a kid, he could do it all, man. And Ricky Steamboat was the same. I don't think Ricky Steamboat ever turned heel. I mean, he probably did in some territory, but these two guys just had chemistry. And whether or not they knew it, again, I'd never seen anything like this because I was so young and all I had growing up was the WWF. I was like, the cross bodies and the elbows and the arm drags and the hip tosses and the way they, again, get out of one move and go into the next. That wasn't body slam, suplex, give you a big punch, which I also enjoyed. Of course I did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been a fan for so long. But this basically took my childhood brain and exploded it, which is why it gets in slap bang in the middle at number 5. And number 4 is one that I'm sure you've all got as well. It's The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25. Now, I prefer this one to WrestleMania 26. I also think it's a stupid thing to say because comparison is the thief of joy. They're both brilliant, and aren't we lucky that we're living in a world where we did get them both served up on a platter. But I suppose this one, I don't want to say it was unexpected, but when we got to Shawn Michaels' retirement match, we knew what this was built off. We understood what the foundations were, and they'd always had good matches. Maybe we'd just forgotten when WrestleMania 25 rolled around, but they went out there. I think they were like match 6 or whatever it was, and that put a chip on their shoulder because they just felt like they were randomly thrown into the middle of the card. It's just excellent. And of course, the WrestleMania streak, Undertaker's streak, is still alive. And Shawn Michaels and him have just on the same page constantly. They do make you believe that he will be able to break it, even though that was never going to happen when you actually take a step back from it. It just goes to show if you find the right dancing partner and everything falls into place, especially because they were on WrestleMania, which is the grandest stage of them all, you can create something that will be timeless. Many people call this the best WWE match of all time. Once again, it's in my list. I think you have to have a discussion about it. And I think it's The Undertaker's best ever match. I truly do. I mean, I'm thinking about that now. That's the lie because I've got another one in this list. It's the second best ever match. And that actually means that it could, it's not Shawn Michaels' best match anyway, but maybe the other one I've got on this list is. But it doesn't matter. It really does have an extra weight attached to it because they did it on WrestleMania, and then it bleeds into the whole retirement thing and the awesome Royal Rumble performance by Shawn Michaels as he tries to work his way back to The Undertaker. And that's what I'm talking about. It's not just good because of what they did on the night, it's the whole build into it, and it's the fallout, which essentially lasted 12 months. It's a mini masterpiece. And number 3, I have 2. And that's only because I can't separate them, because I think they speak to a time when I was kind of evolving as a wrestling fan. It's the loserest thing I'll ever say. But I started to understand how wrestling worked. I started to sort of be well into the backstage stuff. So I've got John Cena versus CM Punk at Money in the Bank 2011, but I also want to throw in CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam 13 because I was live for that one. And seeing that live, I was like, oh my gosh. I don't think I'd ever seen a wrestling match that good live at that point. I mean, maybe I'm incorrect there, but it certainly made a lasting impression on me. And of course, the Money in the Bank 2011 one goes back to the thing I keep coming back to. The match is fine. It's pretty good. Those two worked really well together, but it's in Chicago. It's the crowd going nuts. It's the whole Vince McMahon stuff. It's the contract. It's CM Punk threatening to walk away. It's the pipe bomb promo. It's John Cena talking about TNA and John Cena may get fired and John Cena wanted to have a proper match. All of it just comes together. You're like, this is special, man. This is a magic moment. And I think the reason it kind of helped the Brock Lesnar match is because nobody thought John Cena was going to lose and CM Punk was going to win in 2011. And in 2013, everyone was like, well, Brock Lesnar's not going to lose. But my word, does CM Punk go out of his way to make you think that Brock Lesnar's going to lose? It's also just the way that it's fought, because obviously Brock Rock is the bigger guy, but the way that he does beat up CM Punk for a large part of the early bit, but the way that CM Punk gets back into it, he's got that underdog energy. He made everybody in that building believe. I think it was the Staples Center. I think it was LA. I can't actually remember. But these two matches to me, I think I may put the Drew McIntyre Hell in a Cell match in there too for the same reason. But it really was that kind of 2-year period. It was like, man, this CM Punk really good dude. And he could talk on the microphone and he got you in that way. But yeah, it's just, everyone talks about the summer of Punk for obvious reasons. And it's such a shame that WWE never capitalized on it. But we still got these two matches out the other side. Punk wins one. He doesn't win the other one. You could throw the WrestleMania Undertaker match in there too, which again, you could argue that Punk could have won that one too. But let's call them a trifecta of awesome matches. And I love them very much. And number 2 is where I screwed up on number 4, because this is my favorite Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels match. It's the first ever Hell in a Cell. It's Bad Blood 1997. And this once again ties into me being a stupid kid running around. I stayed up and snuck downstairs to watch this. And I was this close to the TV because I had to keep it so low because I didn't want anyone to know. And seeing the absolute war that these two put themselves to, just the Hell in a Cell in general, you were like, well, what is this cage that's been pumped up with a bunch of drugs? And of course, you get the arrival of Kane. And we talk about this all the time. And actually, The Undertaker and Kane talked about it on the podcast they did recently. I always thought, am I wrong about this? But no, I am correct. WWE stopped talking about Kane for however long it was before this pay-per-view. Paul Bearer wasn't going, your brother is alive. They shouldn't talk about it. We focused on the Shawn Michaels feud, and we focused on everything that happened at SummerSlam 97, and we focused on the fact that we were going to build the Demon's favorite structure, the Hell in a Cell. So when all of a sudden Kane is back, the whole thing rules. It absolutely does. And Shawn Michaels, an absolute masterclass on how to sell your ass off and make it feel like you're dead. The Undertaker does come across like the most brutal human being ever. I mean, some of the chair shots are hard to watch now because of what we know about CTE. But in terms of violent drama, I don't think WWE has ever done it better. And I don't think it's ever been topped as a Hell in a Cell match, which actually was a problem for the Hell in a Cell. I mean, Mankind or Mick Foley and The Undertaker is something different. I don't know what that was. It's a work of art too in its own special way. But this one, I don't know, again, because I was so young. If something possesses you to, again, break the rules of your house because you want to watch a wrestling match, then you've done something right. And then I went to bed being like, Kane, how's that going to tie into Raw? I was desperate to watch the television. And I remember that for 30 years, or whatever it is. Honestly, it's 5 stars plus an extra 4 million stars in the Tokyo Dome. It's so good. It cements the Undertaker character. It cements the Shawn Michaels character. It cements the Kane character. It's brilliant, and I love it, and I always will. And of course, if you watched my content before, you know what my favorite match ever is. It's never going to change, just like why Ocarina of Time was my favorite game ever. It hit me at a very special time in my life. It's Steve Austin versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13. Now, of course, the submission match is interesting, and Ken Shamrock is the referee, and of course, the infamous double turn. Not infamous at all, the famous double turn. But it's more to that, right? For me personally, it was the guy that got me into wrestling, Bret Hart, one of my favorites ever, taking on the guy that hooked me on wrestling, Stone Cold Steve Austin, one of my favorites forever. They're always my 1 and 2, and they always go back and forth. I think probably Bret's number 1, but by like a hair, which is ironic for me. But it's just so good, especially when you learn about all the other stuff. Like Steve Austin found out it was a submission match by watching the TV. It was like, what? This wasn't even going to be one of the matches at one point, but there was lots of controversy with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, so we had to change the card. And I think the reason it's so good is because Bret Hart wanted to make Steve Austin, and Steve Austin wanted to learn from Bret Hart. So they talked to each other. I think it was the first time Steve Austin had bled in a match, and Bret cut him or made the blade or did something. Again, you can hear Steve Austin talking about that. There is some specialness to Ken Shamrock being the referee. It's Ken flipping Shamrock before he goes on his WWF run. I keep saying this, but it's true. It's a work of art. And the fact they were able to switch things around, and Bret Hart, of all people, leaves as the bad guy, and Steve Austin is the good guy. It's like when people say Steve Austin cut the 316 promos, and it's the biggest star ever. It's not true. But all these things came together to propel him to the heights that he did do. And it probably doesn't happen without this match. I did rewatch this. I rewatch this all the time. The fans are baying for blood, which is kind of weird, but at the same time, I don't think they expected the violence they did get. And you have the iconic shot of Steve Austin passing out in the sharpshooter when Bret Hart won't let go. All the blood running down his face. You're never going to be able to top it, man. I mean, it's different if you weren't watching wrestling then. But I'd only just gotten into it. And this is what my two favorite wrestlers were doing. It was totally nuts. It's totally wonderful. And if you are looking for inspiration about to be a wrestler or to get into wrestling more, or you just want to educate your brain, this is the match I will always point to. It's two professionals, two master classes, two Hall of Famers, two legends, two whatever you want to call it, raising the bar to such an absurd height, I don't ever think it will be beaten. And listen, on a different day, I'll probably think something else should go there. But that is one that I will always go back to. 42.5 stars in the Tokyo Dome. Now, more important of all of this, you're going to have your favorite WWE matches. Throw them down there, and hopefully I can correlate them like we did with the other one, and we can do our own separate video. But interact with the video too. Like it, share it, subscribe, notification bell, click the video on the screen. Otherwise, make sure you support me and Grillermind at grillermind.com/Simon. Use code Simon, get 10% off. There's a competition going on at the moment to win a Corvette. All you got to do is buy some stuff, and every single dollar you spend counts as an entry. Otherwise, the Go Fitness, just go Simon20. Patreon.com/Simon316. Otherwise, it's Simon316 on social media. On that B Sky B thing, just search for my name. It's too long as a username. Simon J. Miller on TikTok, Simon Miller on Cameo, and ProWrestlingTees.com/Simon Miller for t-shirts. Obviously, what else would be there? I appreciate support, my friend, and I appreciate you. See you soon.